heralding for so long arrived almost on top of one another. After she sat 2 days in the empty house awaiting the promised truck, it arrived the day before the Sumatran wedding. So far, the only damage Lisa had found was mildewed bed linen. "We really should stay home and finish unpacking," she said as their new car wound its way out of the city and down the road to Bogor. What, and miss the wedding of the century? We'd never hear the end of it. She knew he was trying to make her lighten up, but having work done on the house at the same time they were settling in was madness. It all seemed so permanent and difficult. His 2-week stints offshore dragged on while she fantasized how wonderful it would be when he returned for 5 days. But it was always different from what she'd anticipated. He wanted her by his side at the pool while he talked shop to the other men. She didn't understand what they were talking about, and besides, she freckled terribly. Or he spent hours on the tennis court and was too damn hot out there for her. And she hadn't found any servants she liked except the driver, who appeared to be a nice boy, but now on the open road he didn't understand their commands to slow down. And then he did. They were behind a slow-moving truck. It was filled with soldiers wearing fuchsia berets. At sight of the rifles and cartridge belts slung over their shoulders, the fear always waiting to burst out since her arrival attacked. She shivered and moved closer to David. "Makes one think of Vietnam," he whispered. "Then what do these people have to be so damn patriotic about anyway?" She thought of the national spirit and unity professed in the Pancasila. It claimed a democracy guided by agreement after deliberation among representatives. Its intent was to create social justice for all Indonesians. But what kind of freedom expelled wire service reporters and put the country's great writers under house arrest? No, this was not the Indonesia of her expectations. Declaration of Independence or no, it wasn't the home of the free and the brave. Her anger at this disappointment surprised her into speech. "Go around them," she ordered. "Tina Neonia," the driver said, his voice bordering on the historical. "No permisi." Then a tortured "Please." "The US of A is not, honey," David said, taking her hand. "Merdeka, Merdeka," her heart cried. "I said go around them now." Her voice was shrill in her ears, just like the voices of the silly woman here, telling her what she could and couldn't do. The driver cocked a shaking finger at her. "Maybe bang bang." "For Pete's sake, Lisa, leave it alone," David said. "No wonder he's scared. An old Indonesia hand told me in election year these army trucks scour the city, battering dissenters, hauling them off to prison. The American flag waves before her eyes, and she's back home at the bicentennial. People clap and cheer as she gives her speech about how important a true democracy is, and that personal freedom." The fear squeezed her heart as they were halted by a soldier, but it was because they had arrived and he was directing parking for the general's daughter's wedding. Then the Warburtons and Sheetses pounced on them and dragged them off to a vantage point near the entrance of the handsome villa to watch the arrival of the bridegroom. Shielded by a purple umbrella, surrounded by dancers, clad in the same royal color, he was escorted to the front door by members of the bride's mother's family. "That's because the bride's ancestors come from a matriarchal society," Mildred said, looking smug about her knowledge. Some kind of welcoming formalities were happening at the threshold to the house, but Lisa couldn't see very well through the crowd gathering. On the porch, accordion music began, soon accompanied by violin and guitar. Then the guests following on the heels of the groom, and then tourists were pouring into the house. The first thing Lisa saw were shoes of all shapes and sizes discarded everywhere, just as they'd been stepped out of. How would she ever find them again? Hibiscus and frangipani and blossoms of the flame tree bloomed in every conceivable spot in the house. The air was sweet with the juices of great mounds of pineapple and mango, starfruit and rose apple, and red bananas and other fruits Lisa had never seen before. A traditional tiered wedding cake graced an antique Dutch serving table. Ed steered them past the children sitting on the steps of the sunken room to a row of folding chairs. Great steaming platters of yellow rice surrounded by a row by delicacies as foreign to Lisa as the fruit had been were laid out on a shaped runner that covered most of the floor of the vast living room. More flowers were strewn among the dishes. The groom's family sat cross-legged before the food. The women in traditional dress with heads covered sat at the far end of the room. The men, all wearing squat black hats, sat immediately before the groom and a man of religion standing on a dais. The bride stays in the bedroom while the ceremony goes on out here, Mildred whispered. They read her the do's and don'ts of marriage from a paper, which she then signs. They're married by microphone, Edith giggled until shushed. The strange rite in the language Lisa couldn't seem to learn went on and on, the groom's family continuing to chew and gulp, carrying on loud conversations. Lisa thought it would seem more like a real wedding if the music on the porch had been brought inside. She closed her eyes, and this is all taking place at a clearing of Sumatran jungle, perhaps in the shadows of a great fire with strange huts nearby. A lion, a rhinoceros, an elephant for witnesses, and the music is definitely tom-toms. At last the ceremony was over, and the bride, her plain face beaming beneath a towering gold filigree headdress splayed at the back of her head like a peacock's tail, appeared and was presented to her bridegroom. A member of the wedding party mantled the new husband's business suit with a resplendent robe, placed a puffy turban on his head. The couple, bejeweled and dazzling in gilt and crimson and turquoise, were led by attendants also in centuries-old attire to two ornate and garlanded thrones. Lisa's eyes closed again. This time she and David are in a field of daisies, speaking wedding vows they wrote themselves. A circlet of flowers graces her head, and she wears not a traditional gown, but probably white lace anyway. No matter the custom, it's still the joining of two lives. Voices on the loudspeaker interrupted her reverie, blaring static, hushed. Then Karen Carpenter singing, "We've only just begun, white lace and promises, and we're on our way." The great sob wrenched from her heart was just as unexpected as the song had been. As hard as she tried, she couldn't hold back the tears, making rivers in her makeup. She turned away, hoping no one had seen her capitulation. The two older couples were in line to pay their respects to the bridal pair. Other guests were occupied with finding a place at the runner of foods which had been reset for them. But David was there, leading her to a corner, inhabited only by a large white cockatoo chained to a perch. Carefully he wiped her face with a clean handkerchief. It was just, I understand. You know I don't blame you. It's nobody's fault. I've really tried. I know. He pulled her closer. We'll check it all. But we're half moved in. They can send it back. Who will tame the Patterson jungle? It was an inane thing to say, but she couldn't think of anything else. He cupped her chin with his hand so she had to look directly into his eyes. Probably snakes in there anyway. I wouldn't doubt it, she snuffled into his handkerchief. Or else those big lizards. We'll never know. I'll make the arrangements tomorrow. They're going to be mad, she said. He said, I don't care. The main thing is you'll be home for the bicentennial. Certain inalienable rights, she reminded herself. And among these, then they agreed. After the festivities, the ceremonies, they'd get the divorce. Bridal party arriving. These were Sumatran people, although they lived in Java. And they had this, what they call a matriarchal wedding. So the men are all relatives, uncles, and so on and so forth of the mother. And they arrived in these resplendent costumes. I'm sorry you can't see the colors because I suspect that they're just too old, but originally they were very brilliant. And this is part of them arriving. They do a little dance up the driveway. That's part of their dance they do. See, those guys have purple shirts on. We were standing on a little porch kind of watching them coming. these are just a crowd watching them too. You can go on. These pictures, I'm afraid, are not as good as they once were. Go back to that lesson, would you please? Yeah. The guy on the far right, that's the bridegroom. And the men all wear those little hats in Indonesia.
Is that like his mother?
It probably is. We didn't know the family, but from what people told us, we just knew what people, but individuals, it was hard to know who was who. And that's the men. The men are all sitting on the days, and they have this religious ceremony going on. I think you'll see the man of religion there pretty soon. There's musicians. There's people eating. See, they're sitting on the floor. There's me. Do you see me there in the far right? Boy, that's a lot younger than me, huh? Prettier, too. And, of course, the children are just wrapped. Every time anything goes on, the little Indonesian children, they're pressed up against fences or whatever to see, all these things. They grew up all their life with all these ceremonial, wonderful, exotic things, and they love it. That was the music.
What are they eating?
Well, they were eating what I read, yellow rice, which is called nasi kuning, and just all kinds of delicacies that would have been made before the wedding. There they are. See the background there? It's pretty rich. Could you go back one, please?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that one. The background there. You can see the runners on the floor. They're fatigued. In the background, it's all sort of like a gold embroidery and white, and they're having the wedding. The males are doing the wedding right there, and the bride's not even there. Okay, move on. Okay, we can move on. There's just more people eating. That's the man of religion there in the white. He's the Marian guy, and I don't know who that is. Member of the family, I suppose. Okay. That was that picture on the wall was, I believe, the general who, a younger version of him, who was the father of the bride. Yeah, see, that's the man of religion. Of course, we didn't understand a word he was saying. I suppose some in our party did. There were some people that spoke excellent Indonesian, but I hadn't been there long enough. There's those children I was talking about.
What language do they speak?
They speak Bahasa Indonesian, which is a modified Malaysian. When Sukarno came into power, there was I don't know how many dialects, and he wanted to unify the language. So he came up with what they call Bahasa Indonesia, but their second language is supposed to be English. But a lot of them speak Dutch because they're nursemaids and so on and so forth. And plus, the rich Indonesians send all their kids to school in Holland, in college. Well, there's some of the women in their pretty costumes. The Indonesians' native dress is it's just unbelievable, beautiful. I had one made. That was my friend Femi. She lives in Bellingham, and her sister, she's Indonesian, and quite an interesting story. She was working in the American Embassy, and during that communist uprising time, and a handsome young journalist, American journalist, came and married her and took her back to the United States. And I used to live up near Bellingham, and I knew Femi and Ted. He was a professor then teaching journalism at the college up there. And so she came over there. He was on sabbatical, and they came over while we were living there. And so that's the reason we got to go to the wedding, because it was somebody he knew through his journalist work. And they used to house sit for us, like when we'd go home on vacation. They'd come and house sit for us. They were there. They wanted to be in there 2 years instead of 1 year, because he got a what do you call it? Fulbright, and he stayed a second year and taught at the University of Indonesia. That's you didn't see her. Can you go back 2 pictures?
Right.
No, okay, now the next one. I'm sorry. Forward 1. Okay. There on the far right is the bride. You're in the bride's bedroom now. Bedroom door was open, people could walk by and look in and so on, and that I don't know whether that was her mother or who that was there. But there were some women in there with her. And he's out there, he only has his suit on and his little pedgy hat. And but she's all in her glorious bridal finery, with the big headdress and all that, waiting in there. And it's piped in there to her, the wedding ceremony,
And so after the wedding ceremony, she's presented to her
Yes,
husband.
she will. You'll see her. You'll see her. Yeah.
Are these arranged marriages?
I don't know if this was an arranged marriage or not. That's just an interesting face. Actually, Ted, who I was talking to you about, he took these slides.
Drinking tea or beer?
No, that's tea. That's tea. Muslims don't drink in Indonesia. Not supposed to anyway. Oh, that's another interesting face. Isn't that something?
There you are.
It's Femi and I think he was the uncle, the sister's brother. And he must have been talking to us. I don't remember that, so long ago. The women are getting to eat now. The men eat first. The women are getting to eat. I think we ate last. I think the guests ate last, if I recall.